Welcome back. Let's take a look at markets this morning. We are looking at another triple-digit decline. The Dow Industrial's down 200 points right now. We are awaiting April retail sales numbers this morning. They will be out in 15 minutes' time, estimating a decline of 12% for the month of April. We also have the rhetoric between the U.S. and China flaring up once again with a new push against Huawei technologies this morning, as you heard from Secretary Wilbur Ross. Dagan McDowell, a lot of things that investors are looking at this morning, including the Chinese state media pushing back, making threats to American companies and lawmakers.
That's a story in terms of the fractured relationship that the United States has with China, both on a federal, as a government, as a nation, but also related to private industry that's going to play out literally for years to come. Again, a reticence by China to even begin investigating the origins of the coronavirus that has killed tens of thousands of Americans. But in terms of in terms of the markets, I think this is one of the headwinds that the markets for a very long time will be facing in terms of production and manufacturing in China moving back to the United States. And also in terms of retail sales, some of these chains are beginning to open. And so in the coming weeks, we're going to be listening for, are consumers excited to get back out there and start shopping again? Those who still have jobs or have really been saving their money in the last month and a half.
Yeah, John Hilsenrath, you know, there are a lot of rosy projections for the second half of the year. Do you believe that we will see growth in the third and fourth quarter, John?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the worst of this hit was in March and April, and we're going to start to see some comeback. The big question is how quickly it happens and whether it happens enough to get back all of these jobs that have been lost. But, you know, I would also point to the disconnect between the economy and the markets right now. The markets bottomed in late March. They're up 20% from their bottom. You know, if you look at the S&P 500, I've got three explanations for that. One is just that the Fed and the federal government are pumping so much money into them. Another is that maybe they're getting ahead of themselves. The third, which I'm intrigued by, is perhaps the markets are sniffing out not a vaccine, but treatments that are going to decrease the mortality rates from this virus and allow us to get back to some kind of normalcy in the months ahead. I think that's something we all have to be watching.
I think that's a great point.
What's happening on the treatment?
You're right,
front.
and we just had Jay Walker on from Abijac. They just got a huge $138 million contract from HHS and DOD to manufacture these syringes and distribute 100 million of them with the COVID vaccine in them, John.
Right, and it's not just syringes. There's what's happening in biomedicine right now. I think we're going to look back on this 20 or 30 years from now and look at it as potentially having been revolutionary, how fast the system is moving, not only to produce vaccines, but to find treatments to alleviate the conditions of coronavirus and COVID-19. This could be a seminal moment.
I just wanted to point out that I've said that all along. HIV, for example, no vaccine, but treatments that develop slowly but surely over the years that now reduce the viral load to where it's imperceptible. And that's what it's not vaccine all or nothing. And the American people know that, people who want to get back to work. If we can get a treatment that will prevent people from becoming catastrophically or fatally ill from this virus, that's enough to resume economic function back to a more normal environment.
You know, Dave, I think the question, though, is like, what lesson do we learn from this? Can it always be this way, that we don't have these barriers erected by the FDA and by other regulatory agencies that keep us from being able to recognize and develop cures, not even cures, to what you're saying, you know, these biologics that allow us to fight the disease? I think that really needs to be another takeaway here, which is that we've had a federal bureaucracy that has stood in the way of innovation for years and years and years. And it only took a crisis to finally shake some of these things loose. I hope that is a lasting lesson here as we move through the next couple months and years.
Well, I mean, the one thing I would add to that, though, is like the bureaucracy is there for a reason. You know, there was a lot of speculation early on in this that, certain medications, hydroxychloroquine, for instance, we're going to come in and cure this overnight. And it requires testing. I mean, there does have to be testing. But I think what the bureaucracy learned is that in a crisis, it has to move a lot faster than it did in normal times before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what we heard a bit about yesterday during that Dr. Bright testimony. I want to talk about that, and we're going to be talking about that with Peter Navarro coming up. But let me just ask you about this Taiwan semiconductor news, because this is one major example of bringing manufacturing back to the United States. One of Apple's microchip partners opening a plant in Arizona, which we've been telling you about. According to the Taiwan Semiconductor this morning, the plant is scheduled to open in 2024. It will produce 20,000 chips per month and employ 1,600 people. We will talk about that.